Welcome back to Tactical Pontoon, the Trigger Jedi. Today is a little bit of an informational video. We're a little zoomed in, as you can see, and we're going to move this keychain out of the way, and we're going to put our two subjects in the light, well, in the camera view. So, what do we have here? That looks like two connectors. Two very similar connectors. They're supposed to be similar. They're supposed to be the same thing. What happened is here recently, the supply of factory Glock dot connectors has been a little bit constricted. Excuse me. And in order to keep the pontoon going forward, I have been looking at a variety of different places in order to scoop up the ones that I could, make sure that I keep the triggers rolling. Well, I came across this guy right here. Now, the ad, this was on eBay. Sometimes I find a good deal on eBay for different parts. This guy was on eBay. The picture was of a Glock dot connector, and in my haste, I didn't fully read the description. The seller is a little seller called BZ Green. Okay? And it's got a little green made in the USA tag all over their parts. And so, for the most part, I thought that I was buying a factory Glock dot connector. SP07965. Well, when the package showed up, it was this guy right here. Now, I could tell immediately that something was a little bit off. How could I tell that? Well, because of the finish. It was a pre-polished finish. You're not going to find that out of a Glock dot connector or a Glock connector or a Glock part unless somebody is selling you something that they have polished up themselves. But right out of the box, if it's polished, it's not factory. Okay? So I'm like, well, there we go. This is an aftermarket connector. Maybe there is hope. I looked at it. Overall, the finish was, it was a nice polished finish. It had a dot, which this is the first aftermarket Glock dot connector that I have seen. So I was a bit excited because having the option to get a hold of an aftermarket dot connector is, there's a benefit. Sometimes if especially if it's any good, I was able to measure the geometry, and this ledge right here had the correct geometry, which would mean that if everything worked, it would feel very much like a factory dot connector, which is one of my favorite connectors. The geometry was good. The dot is a little bit off. Okay, if you're just looking at it, and I know this is something that most people aren't going to notice, the dot itself is just a little bit higher on the reset or the cam arm or the reset arm, whatever you want to call it. A little bit off, but obviously having a full polished finish as well as this little divot right here, you've got thicker material, thinner material, thicker material, which is like a factory connector, which has thicker material, thinner material, thicker material. It's part of its spring design. A lot of your aftermarket connectors will not replicate that, and usually that's a dead giveaway. But as I said, this one, the polished finish gave it away as not being factory. So I was excited. Having another option on the market is always a plus. As I said, surface finish looked good, obviously polished compared to the factory one. Things overall looked good. The reset arm, the cam arm looked all right. Everything appeared okay. However, When I installed this, there was an issue. The trigger bar would ride right past this ledge, which means it pushed right past. Instead of riding on the ledge and dropping the sear with a cruciform and firing the weapon, it pushed right past, which meant that this connector is made of the wrong type of steel. It's not a spring steel. It's a low tension steel, which it's incorrect. I bought on that package of them. Excuse me. I had bought 15. I tried all 15 out. Every single one of them failed. The only way that I could get this to function was to over tension this connector. A connector is a spring, so you can add tension to it. That means you bend it away from the trigger housing so that when it sits inside of the frame, it pushes against the frame and make sure that trigger bar follows this geometry and drops the cruciform. Well, when you add extra tension, not only do you add extra friction into the system, but it actually makes the trigger bar ride a little bit lower, which means if the trigger bar rides a little bit lower in the frame, you can run into reset issues and then you have to start adjusting the cruciform. It just became a nightmare of something that was not worth dealing with. The other thing is, when you start adding that much tension, it's the wrong type of steel. Most likely it's going to lose tension and you're just going to end up with a cycle of problems. My goal with this video is to say, if you're looking for dot connectors, or if you're looking for connectors in any way, shape, or form, be careful. Some aftermarket connectors will work, and they'll work great. Some of them won't. This is one that I do not recommend. I have run into connectors in the past. P80 at one time had their own connector that ran into the same issue. It would not hold tension. During 2020, I ran into some issues with those, trying to use those for a little bit because of the sourcing of other connectors just wasn't available. It became a nightmare. I've seen them with some other factory style connectors. Just became a nightmare. So be careful. If you order a connector and right out of the box it's not firing, one, have an armorer's plate so that you can see if the trigger bar is riding right past this connector instead of dropping the cruciform. Really, 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 really recommend you just replace that connector and get something higher quality, because the steel in this thing, like I said, you can add tension to it and it'll probably function for a while, but it's going to give you a headache in the end. As I said, I got this guy off of eBay. The company was BZ Green. In the corner of all of their pictures, they have a little green medallion that says "Made in the USA" on all of their parts. They're all aftermarket parts. I've looked through their stuff since. They have back plates, they have connectors, they have trigger bars and that sort of thing. Stay away from the connectors. There's something up with the steel grade. As I said, I have 15 of them. They all failed to function correctly. I could add tension, but you're looking at adding other problems down the road. A little bit of tension is fine. A factory Glock connector has a little bit of tension. That's what it needs. It's a spring. If you start having to add too much tension, that's when you run into trouble. Now, this isn't talking about G43s and the Slimline series, micro daggers, or anything like that. They need a little bit more tension just because of their design. This is a different deal. I'm talking about a Glock dot connector, which is for the double stack 9mm, or well, actually any of your double stack Glocks, or single stack if it's a 45, one of the odd ones. But BZ Green, it's an aftermarket dot connector. I was kind of excited to have an option on the market. This one is not good, so be careful. Be careful on looking at your connectors. If you run into a tension issue and you have to add too much tension, replace the connector with something that's good, like a factory dot connector at the very least, or one of my tuned ones. Here we go. That's it for today. Tactical Pontoon, the Trigger Jedi. If you have any questions, have any thoughts, leave them in the comment below. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. Later.